There is a sacred power within you, not in some distant realm, not in the stars, but right here, now, in the stillness of your being. Everything you long for, everything you pray for, everything you chase with frantic effort already exists in the unseen. You do not need to fight, you do not need to strive. You must only become inwardly still, silent, and aware. In silence the imagination awakens. In quietness the truth is whispered. And in the absence of noise the presence of the infinite reveals itself. The world outside is but a reflection, a shadow play of the thoughts and assumptions you carry within. If you would but still your tongue, still your reactions, and dwell in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, all things would be drawn to you with effortless grace. This is not passive surrender. This is divine alignment. The silence I speak of is not emptiness, but fullness, a deep vibrating faith that what is unseen is already yours. When you cease to speak against your desire, when you cease to argue with reality, and instead rest in the assurance that all is well, then you will receive. You will receive because you have already accepted inwardly that it is done. Let us now journey into the mystery of stillness, where all creation begins. Let us remember the law, as within, so without. Stay silent, and receive everything. There is a presence within every person that is constantly active, whether we acknowledge it or not. This presence is not moved by outer noise, nor is it dependent on the world for its function. It is the creative center, the divine source, the power that shapes your entire experience. The moment you come into stillness, true stillness, not merely physical quiet, but an inner silence of thought, worry, and resistance, you begin to awaken that presence consciously. This is not something that happens because you strive for it. It is something that is already yours, but it often goes unnoticed because of the constant noise of the outer world and the endless dialogue we carry within our own minds. When you become still, you enter the threshold between the seen and unseen, between what is and what can be. It is here that real power begins to reveal itself. Most people spend their entire lives reacting. They react to their circumstances, to the words of others, to the economy, to their fears, to their past, and to the limited beliefs handed down to them. Reaction is a product of disconnection from inner stillness. In the rush to defend, to correct, to fix, to achieve, we miss the greatest truth that the state of stillness within is where our truest authority lies. The world teaches you to speak louder, to do more, to prove yourself, to fight for your place. But the Spirit whispers that all things flow from the state of non-resistance, from the deep knowing that you are already connected to what you seek. This knowing is awakened in the silence of being, not in words, not in explanations, but in that sacred stillness where thoughts no longer dominate, and you become aware of your consciousness as the only true reality. It is in this inner stillness that one recognizes the futility of struggle. When you are still, you begin to see that nothing outside of you has true power over you unless you agree with it inwardly. It is not what the world says that determines your life. It is what you accept, what you entertain, what you feel to be true in the quiet of your soul. When you quiet the external chatter and withdraw attention from appearances, the power of assumption, of vision, of belief begins to take root. You are no longer trying to manipulate life from the outside. Instead, you are allowing it to unfold from within, where all things are first conceived. This is not a state of laziness or apathy. Stillness is not indifference. It is not the absence of desire. In fact, it is in the stillness that your purest desires are clarified. All that is false begins to fall away when you no longer feed it with reaction or resistance. The anxious thoughts, the false identities, the worries you inherited, they begin to dissolve because they cannot survive in silence. They need noise, chaos, and constant movement to exist. When you become still, you stop feeding the illusions, and in doing so, the truth has space to emerge. The truth that you are already whole, that everything is already in motion on your behalf, that you do not need to force blessings. They are drawn to the inner state you occupy in stillness. In stillness, the power of imagination becomes most alive. The inner vision that seemed cloudy before begins to shine with clarity. You begin to see with spiritual eyes rather than natural ones. You don't wait for the outer world to approve before you believe. You believe because in your stillness, you see it done. You feel it real. You taste the reality of your desire before the outer world can even recognize the change. That is the power of the still soul. It does not argue with facts. It rests in the superior truth of faith. And faith is not mere hoping. It is knowing beyond the physical. It is standing still and seeing the salvation of your life unfold through unseen laws. Stillness invites you to rest in the end, to dwell in the feeling of completion even while appearances remain unchanged. This rest is not inactivity, but spiritual mastery. It is the decision to no longer chase, no longer explain, no longer doubt. It is a return to your center, your divine origin. And from that place the world begins to conform. Circumstances shift. People respond differently. Opportunities seem to find you. But it is not because you shouted loud enough. It is because you became still enough to receive. You stopped resisting the flow. You stopped doubting the process. And in doing so you entered alignment. This alignment is not achieved through striving but through remembering. Remembering who you are before the noise, before the conditioning, before the fear. You return to the still point within you where peace lives, where creation begins, where all things are possible, because you are no longer separated from the source. And once you access that place, you find that it was never far. It was never something you had to earn. It was always waiting beneath the layers of noise, the masks and the voices of the world. It is accessed in silence. Not silence as the absence of sound, but silence as the presence of divine awareness. The quiet, alert state where you become aware that you are aware. From this place, a shift occurs. The power that once seemed outside of you begins to rise within. You realize that you are not merely reacting to life. You are life. You are consciousness expressing itself, and in stillness you are in full command. You are no longer living by chance, but by choice. And that choice is made not by force, but by becoming inwardly still and choosing the state you dwell in. The outer must reflect the inner. So you begin with stillness. You begin with silence. You begin by returning to yourself. Silence is not just the absence of noise. It is the cradle of creation, the invisible womb from which all form arises. When one begins to grasp the depth of this truth, they stop fearing silence and begin to revere it. Silence is the atmosphere where ideas are born, where desires are incubated, where visions take shape in the invisible before they emerge in the visible. It is within this silence that the Spirit speaks, not with words but with impressions, knowing and feeling. The creative force that governs all life responds not to noise, but to still awareness. The louder your outer world becomes, the more crucial it is to find the place of quiet within. For in that quiet the real work is done, not the work of hands, but the work of belief, the work of imagination, the work of aligning with the reality you wish to express. Many misunderstand silence as passivity. They believe that if they are not speaking, doing, or explaining, they are failing to act. But in truth, silence is one of the most powerful forms of action. It is a declaration that you no longer seek validation from the world around you. It is the silent vote of confidence that says, I know it is done. Words can often betray uncertainty. Silence, however, when grounded in awareness, radiates certainty. When you hold a vision silently, when you feel a truth without broadcasting it, when you rest in a desire without clinging to it, you step into the same creative pattern that governs the universe itself. Stars do not shout to be seen. Seeds do not scream to grow. All creation emerges out of quiet intention. The creative force that shapes all things is not chaotic. It is deliberate, subtle, and obedient to inner law. It listens not to your words, but to your state of being. And your state of being is clearest when you are silent. In silence, you are no longer trying to convince anyone, not even yourself. You are no longer trying to force or manipulate. You are simply being, and in being you are aligning. There is a rhythm to creation that cannot be forced. It must be felt. And that rhythm reveals itself in the absence of mental noise. It reveals itself when you cease the internal monologue and simply rest in the reality you are choosing to occupy. This is where creation begins, not with effort, but with alignment, not with sound, but with stillness. When a person fully embraces silence as a creative force, they begin to use their imagination with reverence. They stop using imagination to rehearse worry or repeat old traumas. Instead, they begin to create intentionally in the silent sanctuary of the mind. They begin to visualize with purpose, not to wish, but to know. They feel the end result without explaining it. They walk in the assumption of fulfillment, not needing anyone else to understand, because the silence has already confirmed it. This kind of creation is not bound by logic or linear thinking. It operates by the law of feeling. What you feel is true in stillness will project itself into form. In the quiet of imagination, a person can revise the past, reframe the present, and recreate the future. They can move into states of abundance, healing, joy, and purpose, all without making a sound. And as they dwell in those states silently, faithfully, persistently, life begins to conform. People and events move in response to the invisible command of the quieted heart. The world begins to shift, not because it was shouted into submission, but because it was silently invited to reflect what is now believed to be true. This is the hidden power of those who master silence. They do not need to be loud. Their energy speaks. Their state creates. Their imagination governs their world. Silence as a creative force also protects what is sacred. Too often we share visions before they are ready, expose dreams before they are rooted, and speak things that should have remained hidden until their time. When you understand the power of silence, you protect the seeds of your becoming. You do not expose them to premature opinions or skeptical eyes. You carry them close within the soil of your inner world, where they are nourished by attention, belief, and silence. Like a child in the womb, your vision needs time in the dark. It needs silence to take shape before it can stand the light of day. There is also a healing power in silence. When you become truly silent, not just externally, but within, you stop rehearsing the narrative of lack, pain, and fear. You give your nervous system a new signal. You enter a state where healing is not just possible, it is inevitable. In that sacred silence, you remember who you are beyond the noise of the world. You reconnect to the infinite intelligence that knows how to restore, realign, and renew you from the inside out. No one needs to see it. No one needs to hear it. The transformation is internal, but its fruits will become undeniable. This is the secret strength of those who learn to sit in silence and allow the creative force to do its work. Even in moments of great uncertainty, the creative power of silence remains. When the world feels chaotic, when you are tempted to react, to argue, or to justify yourself, choosing silence can be the most radical act of faith. It is the invisible stance of someone who knows that their words do not create reality. Their state does, and by choosing to remain inwardly calm and focused, they protect their creative power. They channel it toward what they truly desire, rather than scattering it on resistance or fear. The energy that might have been lost in conflict is now available for creation. So the invitation is not to say more, but to feel more. Not to fight harder, but to know deeper. Not to convince the world, but to dwell silently in the assumption of what is already yours. In this still, invisible place where the noise of the world fades and the voice within becomes clear, you become a co-creator with the divine. You don't need to speak it into being. You only need to see it, feel it, and rest in the assurance that it already is. Imagination has been misunderstood for generations. It has been treated as a child's toy, a realm of fantasy with no real bearing on practical life. But in truth, imagination is the most sacred and creative faculty given to mankind. It is not something to be entertained for leisure. It is the blueprint of reality, the unseen brush that paints the circumstances of life. When you rely on effort alone, you are working with limited tools, your hands, your schedule, your resources, your connections. But when you awaken the power of imagination, you are no longer confined to what the outer world provides. You begin to draw from the infinite. You see beyond what is and step into what can be. Imagination does not wait for permission. It creates the permission. It does not observe the world for truth. It declares the truth and watches the world conform. That is why effort, though useful, is never the root of manifestation. Imagination is. When you understand imagination's divine role, you cease striving and begin dwelling. Striving is the act of chasing after what you feel is missing. It is rooted in the belief that something is out there, far from you, requiring you to bridge the gap by force. But imagination eliminates the need for the gap altogether. It assumes the position of completion, of fulfillment, of already done. In this way, imagination transcends time. It brings the future into the present. It allows you to live in the end, not just think about it. The one who masters imagination can feel rich while having no money, feel healed while symptoms persist, feel chosen while being overlooked. And it is that feeling, cultivated, sustained, and honored, that begins to pull the physical world into agreement. There are those who believe that imagination is a form of denial, that to visualize something not yet seen is to deceive oneself. But it is not denial, it is creation. Everything that exists in this world was first imagined. The chair, the home, the city, the art, the technology, all of it began as a vision unseen by others. The difference between the visionary and the doubter is that the visionary trusts what they see in the invisible, while the doubter demands outer proof before belief. But the outer world is always trailing the inner one. It is a delayed mirror. If you wait for things to appear before you feel them real, you remain a prisoner to circumstance. But if you dare to imagine boldly and consistently, you step into the seat of authority. You begin to live from within to without, not the other way around. Effort tends to come from fear. It says, if I don't do this now, I won't have enough. It carries panic in its tone. It measures progress by exhaustion. It operates in survival mode, constantly watching the clock and comparing the scoreboard. Imagination, on the other hand, comes from faith. It says, I already have it, and my world will reflect it soon. It does not panic. It does not overwork. It does not measure worth by output. It simply holds the vision, waters it with belief, and trusts the invisible process at play. This is not laziness. It is intelligent creation. It is the way of the mystic, the spiritual architect, who knows that form follows thought, and thought is most powerful when felt as real. The greatest creators in history were not those who toiled endlessly. They were those who envisioned boldly. They saw what was not yet seen and acted as though it were already here. Their imagination went before them and carved the path. Their bodies simply followed. This is why effort, while necessary in practical ways, should never replace the role of imagination. When you place imagination above effort, you are no longer laboring to make things happen. You are aligning with what has already been created in spirit. You walk into it with grace. The steps you take feel less like struggle and more like unfolding. You are not forcing the door open. You are watching it open because you have already entered it in your imagination. This is not a passive state of hoping. Imagination requires inner discipline. It means returning again and again to the vision when distractions pull you away. It means holding the feeling of the wish fulfilled even when nothing outside supports it. It means silencing the voice of doubt, not by arguing but by feeling more deeply into the truth you have chosen. You do not just see the image. You feel its texture, its weight, its sound, its emotion. You immerse yourself in the invisible until it becomes more real to you than the visible. That is the work. And that work, though silent and internal, changes everything. To rely on imagination over effort does not mean you never move or act. It means your movement is inspired, not panicked. It means your steps are guided by vision, not fear. You are no longer driven by what you lack. You are pulled by what you see within. And because of that, your work becomes a joy. Your path becomes a flow, and your results multiply, not because you forced them, but because you imagined them into form. The outer world becomes a canvas, and imagination is the unseen hand that paints upon it. It governs your energy, your tone, your posture, your choices, and all of those elements begin to resonate with the vision you carry inside. This is why imagination is the master key to manifestation. It is not a game or a luxury. It is the divine instrument through which the unseen becomes seen. It is the soul's blueprint for expression. The one who uses imagination intentionally is never truly empty, lost, or defeated. They may be unseen for a time, but they are always building. They are always creating, and because of that, their reality must bend. Their life must conform. What is held within must eventually be held without, not because of endless effort, but because of sacred imagination. To dwell in the feeling of fulfillment is to live from the end. To take your emotional and mental residence in the state of the desired outcome as though it were already your current reality. This is not about imagining what could be, or wishing something might happen. It is about occupying the space within yourself where the dream is no longer a distant hope but a present truth. It is a spiritual discipline, one that defies the logical mind and transcends the sensory world. The body may still feel the ache of incompletion, the eyes may still witness the lack of change, but the inner man, the unseen self, chooses to feel the end result with such conviction that the outer world has no choice but to catch up. Every thought, every assumption, every inner dialogue is redirected to support the fulfillment of that which is already accepted as true within. This state is not a fleeting emotion. It is not a quick visualization or a positive affirmation repeated without feeling. It is a deep, conscious immersion into the experience of having. You feel the joy of it, the gratitude of it, the certainty of it. You walk, speak, and think from the posture of completion. You no longer approach life as someone seeking. You approach life as someone expressing what has already been found. This shift in identity is subtle but powerful. It turns the seeker into the creator, the warrior into the witness, the doubter into the declarer. You begin to say not "I hope it happens," but "it is mine now." That shift is the cornerstone of manifestation, for the universe responds not to pleading but to embodiment. The feeling of fulfillment is the language of the unseen realm. It is how the inner world communicates its instructions to the outer world. When you sustain this feeling, when you dwell in it regardless of what appears to be happening around you, you activate a law higher than circumstance. You move from reaction to creation. You no longer interpret your life through the lens of delay, struggle, or distance. You interpret it through the lens of arrival. Everything that comes your way is no longer judged by how far it seems from your desire, but how it is being used to unfold it. You become a partner with the divine process, trusting the timing not because you're passive, but because you already feel the result is done. And when something is already done inwardly, the need to rush outwardly disappears. To dwell in the feeling of fulfillment requires an inner stillness, a choice to remain centered even in the face of contradiction. The world may give you every reason to believe the opposite of your desire. You may face rejection, silence, lack, or even ridicule. But none of that defines your reality. Your reality is defined by what you accept and sustain within. If you feel wealthy in the depths of your being, wealth begins to move toward you in subtle and overt ways. If you feel deeply loved, the energy of love begins to radiate from you and return to you. If you feel healed, the cells of your body respond in alignment with that emotional blueprint. It is not magic, but divine law. The inner state generates the outer form. The mistake many make is in wavering. They allow the outer world to dictate their feelings. They feel confident only when results appear and discouraged when they do not. But true dwelling is not conditional. It is rooted in conviction. You train your emotional body to remain faithful to the inner vision regardless of what is seen. You feed that feeling with attention. You return to it throughout the day. You treat it like a home you never leave. Every time you speak from that state, every time you think and act as one who has already received, you are reinforcing the bridge between the invisible and the visible. And in time, the visible cannot help but reflect the invisible truth you have honored. It is in this state that action becomes inspired rather than frantic. You no longer act to prove or earn, you act as an expression of what is already yours. You are not working to get something, you are responding to what you have already received in spirit. This is a higher form of movement, one that flows with purpose and clarity. The right ideas, the right words, the right opportunities find you, because you have become an energetic match to them. You are not chasing them down, they are drawn to the version of you that already lives in the end. And this is why the feeling must be sustained. Not touched occasionally, but lived in daily, like a second skin, like a song you never stop singing. There is no fulfillment without feeling. The intellect alone cannot sustain creation. You must move beyond mental repetition into heartfelt knowing. This knowing is not always loud. It is often a quiet, steady sense of yes within you. It is the deep inner calm that says, I no longer worry because I already have it. And that calm is a signal. It is a frequency. It sends out a vibration that the world begins to mirror back in ways your mind could never have predicted. Your job is not to figure out the how, but to dwell in the reality of the what, and trust that the how is being orchestrated by forces greater than your own understanding. This is not a technique to try for a few minutes and discard when results do not come quickly. It is a way of being. It is a shift in identity, from one who hopes to one who knows. You wear the feeling like clothing. You sit with it, sleep with it, rise with it. You allow it to flavor your words, shape your expectations, and govern your reactions. You become the thing you seek, not by pretending but by dwelling in its emotional truth so deeply that your body begins to respond, your behavior begins to change, and your life begins to mirror back what you have faithfully entertained within. Aligning with the unseen reality is a sacred act of trust, a decision to live by what cannot yet be measured, touched, or validated by the senses. It is the choice to believe in what the heart knows before the eyes can see it. This alignment is not based on logic or facts, but on the inner awareness that what you seek is already real in the spiritual realm. It is already formed, already finished, already waiting to be received, not created by striving, but received through inner agreement. You are not trying to convince yourself of something false. You are recognizing a truth that already exists beyond the veil of appearances. To align with the unseen reality means to adjust your thoughts, your emotions, and your responses so they match the version of life you have chosen inwardly, not the one the world presents by default. This alignment begins with a shift in identity. Instead of identifying with your circumstances, your past, or the labels others have placed on you, you begin to identify with your desired state. You become one with the version of you who already has what you long for. You don't ask for it from a place of lack. You dwell in it from a place of union. You speak not as one trying to get there, but as one who already is. And this inner posture becomes a magnetic force. It sends a clear signal to the universe that you are ready, not because you demanded it loudly, but because you became a match for it silently. You no longer oscillate between belief and doubt. You become steady, rooted still in your inner knowing. When you align with the unseen, your entire life begins to reflect this choice. You don't wait for circumstances to change before you change how you feel. You bring the elevated emotion into the now and allow it to lead your experience. If you want peace, you embody peace. If you want success, you walk in the confidence of one who is already successful. If you want love, you open your heart as if it were already full. This is not make-believe. This is how spiritual law operates. The external world is slow to reflect what is already present in consciousness, but reflected it must. What you hold in your inner world with clarity, consistency and emotion begins to break through the fog of current conditions and rewrite your visible experience. Aligning with the unseen also means letting go of the need to control the method of manifestation. You surrender the how and allow the unseen intelligence that governs all creation to work in its perfect timing and rhythm. You don't need to chase or strive or manipulate. You don't need to force outcomes or exhaust yourself proving your worth. You simply remain faithful to the end you have seen in your imagination. You trust that the divine knows every step required to bring it into form. And you stay in step by honoring the inner reality above the outer noise. Even when nothing seems to be happening, you remain aligned. Even when the world presents the opposite of your vision, you refuse to be moved. This unwavering inner stance is not built overnight. It requires you to quiet the voice of fear, to release attachment to outcomes, and to discipline your mind to remain loyal to the unseen. You begin to see tests and delays not as signs of failure, but as opportunities to deepen your alignment. You stop reacting to every shadow and start responding from your center. This does not mean you ignore reality. It means you no longer bow to it. You understand that physical reality is delayed evidence, and by the time you see it, the real creation has already happened. You choose to anchor yourself in the realm of cause, not effect, and in doing so you begin to rise above the illusion of limitation. To align with the unseen reality is also to embrace mystery. It is to live in wonder, to make peace with uncertainty, to no longer demand constant proof before you feel secure. You stop asking, "Is it working?" and instead declare, "It is done." You learn to live from your imagination rather than your memory. You don't measure your future by your past. You don't define your worth by previous experiences. You allow the vision you carry to become more vivid than the facts in front of you. And in that space of inner clarity, you find strength. You are no longer fragmented by doubt. You are whole in your belief. You carry the presence of your answered prayer in your energy, and others begin to feel it even before they understand it. This alignment is subtle but powerful. It may not be visible at first glance, but it changes everything. The way you speak shifts. The way you carry yourself shifts. The way you respond to challenges and opportunities shifts. You are no longer waiting for permission to believe. You have already said yes within. And that inner yes begins to open doors, attract favor, draw solutions, and position you for divine appointments. You walk as if the thing is already yours, because in truth it is. The only question is whether you are willing to live in that truth long enough for the world to catch up. There is a deep security that comes from this kind of alignment. It quiets the noise of urgency. It calms the need for validation. It allows you to rest, not in passivity but in power. You are no longer tossed by the winds of opinion or shaken by temporary setbacks. Your vision becomes your compass, your feeling becomes your guide, and your faith becomes your foundation. You don't argue with appearances, you transcend them. You walk through life with the quiet confidence of one who knows their unseen reality is the truest reality of all. Letting go of resistance and reaction is one of the most liberating acts a person can choose. Yet it often feels like the hardest. We are conditioned to respond to life by pushing back against what we don't like, fighting what we fear, and trying to control what feels uncertain. But resistance is not power, it is bondage. It keeps you tangled in the very situations you want to escape. It holds your attention hostage to what is unwanted. The more you resist something, the more energy you feed it, and the more it grows in your awareness. Reaction likewise is the echo of resistance. It's the automatic pattern of defense, doubt, and fear that kicks in when something challenges your sense of peace or control. But when you stop resisting and reacting, you reclaim your authority. You step out of the storm and into the eye of peace. And from that still center, creation becomes possible. The truth is that nothing in life has meaning until you assign it one. An event, a word, a delay, none of these things are inherently good or bad until your inner narrative gives them power. When you react, you give away your creative energy. You shift into a posture of defense, which means you have already accepted the outer circumstance as more real than your inner truth. Reaction is a declaration of powerlessness. It says, this thing has control over me. But when you choose not to react, when you observe with stillness and choose your response deliberately, you are no longer ruled by circumstance, you are ruling it. Letting go of resistance doesn't mean you approve of everything that happens. It means you stop giving it the power to define your state of being. The energy of resistance is always tied to fear. Fear that things won't change, that you won't get what you desire, that you'll lose something valuable, or that you're not enough. And fear feeds on attention. The more you dwell on what you don't want, the more it embeds itself in your consciousness. This is why letting go of resistance is not weakness. It is clarity. It's the understanding that your real power lies in attention, in focus, in choosing where to invest your emotional currency. If you stop reacting, if you stop fighting with appearances, you redirect your energy toward what you actually desire. You start feeding faith instead of feeding fear. You start building instead of battling. And slowly the landscape of your life begins to change, because the foundation of your perception has changed. Letting go is not a passive act. It's an inner shift from force to flow. It's the quiet decision to no longer need things to be different in order for you to feel aligned. You stop demanding that the outside world fix itself before you choose peace. You stop waiting for someone else's apology to feel worthy. You stop needing everything to go your way in order to believe it will all work out. When you let go of resistance, you no longer live in constant negotiation with life. You stop arguing with what is, and instead you become deeply present in what can be. You make space for miracles, not because you force them into existence, but because your inner state is finally soft enough to receive them. Reaction is often born from habit, unconscious patterns that were learned over years of conditioning. But just because it is familiar doesn't mean it is necessary. The moment you pause before reacting, you create a gap, a sacred space between stimulus and response. In that gap, you get to choose. You can respond with fear, with anger, with judgment, or you can respond with awareness, with calm, with wisdom. That one moment of choice can alter the trajectory of your day, your relationships, your decisions, and ultimately your reality. You are not at the mercy of your emotions. You are not bound to your past reactions. You are free to create a new rhythm of being, one rooted in alignment rather than defense. Letting go of resistance also means surrendering the need to control how everything unfolds. Control is a form of fear disguised as strategy. It tries to plan every detail, predict every outcome, and avoid every mistake. But control is brittle. It cracks under pressure. Flow, on the other hand, is flexible. It adapts, trusts, and listens. When you let go of the need to control, you open the door for a higher intelligence to guide your steps. You allow space for divine timing, for unexpected blessings, for a path that may not make sense to the mind, but is perfectly orchestrated for your growth. You realize that your role is not to manage the entire universe. It is to remain in alignment with what you've asked for, and to trust that it is already on its way. Letting go of resistance transforms relationships. When you stop reacting to people's words or behaviors, you stop giving them the power to disrupt your peace. You stop trying to change others to fit your expectations. You begin to listen more, judge less, and love from a place of fullness rather than need. You start seeing beyond the surface, recognizing that everyone is moving through their own unseen battles. Your compassion grows, your patience deepens, and your energy shifts from trying to control others to mastering yourself. This shift not only frees you, it frees those around you to meet you in that same space of non-resistance. In every area of life, whether it's money, love, health, or purpose, resistance blocks flow. It tenses the body, clouds the mind, and weighs the heart. Letting go is not giving up. It's clearing the channel. It's choosing to believe that life is not against you, that delay is not denial, that confusion is not failure. It's learning to sit with uncertainty without making it mean disaster. It's becoming a vessel that holds the vision even when the evidence is missing. It's trusting that your inner alignment is the true cause and that all else is simply unfolding in response. The more you release the need to fight what is, the more you can welcome what can be. You become a co-creator instead of a reactor. You begin to live from a place of inner strength that no outer chaos can shake. You stop being swayed by the noise, and you start being led by the still, small voice within. This voice does not shout. It does not panic. It simply waits for you to become quiet enough to hear it. And when you do, it leads you, not with force, but with grace. Receiving through inner acceptance is not a matter of earning or achieving. It is about coming into agreement with what has already been given. The divine does not withhold anything. All that you desire exists in the unseen, waiting not to be created, but to be received. Yet many live their lives closed off to receiving, not because they lack faith in what is possible, but because they have not yet accepted within themselves that they are worthy, that it is safe, and that it is already done. Inner acceptance is the spiritual permission slip you give to yourself. It is not passive resignation, but the active embrace of what you've longed for. It is the moment your heart opens to the truth that you no longer need to strive, chase, or convince the world to give you something. You already have it in spirit, and now by accepting it internally, you make yourself the container for its arrival. Acceptance begins by dissolving resistance to good. Many people unconsciously resist what they say they want. They carry guilt, unworthiness, doubt, and fear disguised as humility or realism. They believe they must wait for the right conditions, the perfect behavior, or someone else's permission before they can claim their blessing. But inner acceptance breaks all those barriers. It says, I receive because it is mine by divine right. I do not need to earn it, prove myself, or wait for someone else to agree with it. This kind of acceptance is a form of surrender, not to defeat, but to abundance. It is the recognition that you are already connected to the source of all things, and what flows from that source is not dependent on outside approval. When you practice inner acceptance, you are not begging or hoping, you are allowing. You are stepping into a frequency where your inner state matches the end result. You are saying yes, not with your lips, but with your emotions, your thoughts, your energy. You are making peace with your desire and treating it as something familiar, not foreign. You stop looking at your goal as distant or unlikely and begin to live as if it were already integrated into your life. You stop asking, when will it come, and begin to declare, it is mine now. This shift in consciousness opens the gates of manifestation. You become aligned with the vibration of that which you seek, and in that alignment there is no effort, only attraction. Inner acceptance is not something that happens automatically just because you want something. It is cultivated, moment by moment, especially when you are tempted to doubt. It's a gentle but firm inner agreement you make every time your mind tries to revert to worry, or your emotions try to fall back into fear. It is an act of presence. It is when you look at your circumstances and instead of reacting, you choose to remain in the state of reception. You are no longer demanding a sign, you are embodying the answer. That embodiment sends a signal to life itself, and life begins to rearrange circumstances in response to that inner agreement. Receiving through inner acceptance also means recognizing that the answer often arrives subtly. It may not always come in grand gestures or overnight changes. Sometimes it appears through a shift in perception, a new opportunity, a person unexpectedly placed in your path, or an internal calm you've never felt before. But if you are not in the state of receiving, you may miss it, dismiss it, or sabotage it. Acceptance sharpens your awareness. It allows you to see with new eyes. You begin to recognize doors where you once saw walls. You begin to hear guidance in moments you used to overlook. You stop trying to control the form the answer takes and become grateful that the answer is already unfolding. When you fully receive inwardly, your external actions become more meaningful and inspired. You are no longer acting out of desperation, but from a sense of completeness. Your behavior shifts from seeking to expressing. You start treating your goals not as escape routes from pain, but as natural expressions of the person you already are. You give not to earn approval, but because you are already abundant. You love not to get love in return, but because you are already overflowing with it. This internal fullness becomes your magnetism. The people, circumstances, and resources that match this energy begin to appear, not by coincidence, but by alignment. Inner acceptance is also the healing of old narratives. Many carry subconscious stories that block reception, stories of not being enough, of always struggling, of needing to sacrifice joy for worthiness. But these are not truths. They are beliefs, and beliefs can be rewritten. The moment you begin to question these stories and replace them with truths like I am enough, I am ready, and it is safe to receive, you are creating new neural pathways, new energetic patterns, and new openings for grace. This internal shift may not feel dramatic, but it is revolutionary. It changes the way you breathe, the way you walk into a room, the way you pray, the way you hope. You are no longer pleading, you are welcoming. To receive fully, you must also stop measuring. Measuring implies doubt. It constantly checks the outer world for signs of progress. But true acceptance does not check. It trusts. It knows that the roots are growing long before the tree appears. It finds peace in the invisible stage, knowing the visible is inevitable. This trust deepens your ability to wait without anxiety, to rest without guilt, and to give without fear. You no longer grip tightly to your desires, afraid they might slip away. You hold them lightly, reverently, knowing they are already anchored in your spirit. Receiving through inner acceptance is a lifestyle. It is a way of moving through the world with openness, expectancy, and grace. It is a quiet confidence that you don't have to chase what belongs to you. It will find you because you have already found it within. You have said yes, and your yes is enough. You no longer live with clenched fists and guarded hearts. You walk with open hands and soft trust, knowing that what is yours is not determined by chance, but by choice. The choice to believe, to align, and to receive. In the quiet places of your soul, where no noise intrudes and no fear dominates, there lies a truth more powerful than effort, louder than words, and more certain than the conditions that surround you. You were never meant to chase life. You were meant to receive it through the posture of alignment, belief, and stillness. When you stay silent, not in suppression but in sacred awareness, you begin to feel the divine rhythm moving all things on your behalf. You stop reacting and start creating. You stop striving and start imagining. You stop doubting and begin receiving, not through struggle but through inner acceptance. The world will always pull at your attention, urging you to speak louder, do more, prove your worth. But your power lies in the invisible, in your ability to dwell in the end, to walk as if it's already done, to rest in the knowing that what you carry within is far more real than what you see without. When you become still, when you choose not to argue with your vision, when you align with the unseen and let go of resistance, you unlock the gates of heaven within you. You no longer wait for miracles, you become the space in which they unfold. Stay silent, not because you are weak, but because your silence is sacred. It is where imagination breathes, where faith expands, and where you receive everything that is already yours. Tonight I invite you to step beyond the veil of waking reason and enter the sacred silence that precedes your sleep. In those final 5 minutes before you surrender to the night, you hold in your hands the key to creation itself. This is not mere theory or suggestion. It is law. Whatever you accept as true in those quiet moments, whatever you dare to assume with feeling and belief, begins at once to shape the unseen forces of your world. You do not manifest by toil or effort, but by inner conviction. And the most potent time to plant this conviction is just before sleep, when the conscious mind begins to drift and the gate to the subconscious swings wide open. In that state, your assumptions are no longer questioned. They are received, nourished, and eventually born into your reality. What you feel, believe, and imagine as true in those last 5 minutes is what your world will echo back to you. So tonight, as we explore this forgotten power, I urge you to make your inner world more real than what your senses report. Lay down not in worry, not in lack, but in the feeling of your wish fulfilled. For in sleep you meet the Creator within, and whatever you present to Him, He shall make manifest. In the moments before sleep, a profound transition occurs within the mind, a descent from the conscious realm of reason and sensory awareness into the deep, fertile soil of the subconscious. It is in this delicate passage where the true creative power of man resides, though few recognize its significance. During the day, the conscious mind dominates. It judges, analyzes, rejects, and filters all that we encounter. It is necessary for navigation through the world, but it is also the very part of us that limits and confines based on logic and experience. Yet at night, as consciousness fades, the conscious mind begins to withdraw its watchful presence. In this withdrawal lies the golden opportunity, the moment when the subconscious becomes receptive, impressionable, and eager to receive the seeds we plant through imagination, feeling, and belief. The subconscious does not argue. It does not question the validity of what you show it. It does not require evidence. It accepts as true whatever it is impressed with deeply and consistently, and it tirelessly works to express these impressions in the external world through the law of assumption. It governs the involuntary functions of life, the unseen currents of behavior, relationships, circumstances, and events that weave together to form what we call our reality. Most people live in ignorance of this law, assuming that life merely happens to them, unaware that they are the silent architects of their experience. The reason this law often goes unnoticed is because it operates quietly, invisibly, and often slowly in ways that appear coincidental or natural. Yet it is as precise and obedient as the laws of gravity or electricity. It will manifest what it is given, and it is most vulnerable to influence during the last 5 minutes before sleep, when the conscious gatekeeper grows drowsy and the subconscious becomes fully alert. This gateway is not just theoretical, it is experiential. When a person lies down at night, free from the distractions of the outer world, their inner world becomes their only reality. Thoughts and feelings, once kept at bay by noise and activity, rise to the surface. Many people drift off to sleep in states of fear, anxiety, regret, or longing. They unknowingly lull themselves into unconsciousness with stories of limitation and lack. In doing so, they are passing these impressions into the subconscious, which accepts them as the blueprint for tomorrow. Night after night, they repeat the ritual, and day after day, life answers them with more of the same. The tragedy is not in the repetition, but in the unawareness of what they are truly doing. If they only knew the power of this gateway, they would guard it more diligently than any treasure on earth. The doorway to the subconscious opens in silence, in stillness, in receptivity. It is not forced open by willpower but accessed through surrender, through the quiet assurance that what is imagined with feeling in this twilight space will eventually solidify in the world of form. The secret lies in assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled, not hoping, not pleading, but entering the state of already having received. This is not daydreaming, it is a conscious act of faith, an internal shift in identity. When one assumes the state of the ideal self, whether it is the loved, the healed, the prosperous, or the wise, and holds it gently but firmly before sleep, the subconscious receives it as truth. It then begins to bring about situations, ideas, encounters, and transformations aligned with that inner truth. The person may not notice the shift immediately, but the momentum builds in silence, and soon the outer life reflects the inner change. This gateway, then, is not to be taken lightly. It is the secret chamber where destinies are forged and realities are chosen. To stand at its threshold with awareness is to stand before the creative power of the universe within oneself. The imagination becomes the instrument, and the feeling becomes the voice. One must speak in the language the subconscious understands, not in words or commands, but in emotions, assumptions, and mental pictures that are accepted as already real. It is not enough to repeat affirmations mechanically or visualize passively. One must believe, even if just for a moment, that the imagined scene is unfolding now, and must allow the corresponding feeling to saturate the being completely. The mind that understands this begins to live deliberately. No longer is life a stream of random events, but a canvas waiting to reflect the last image held before the fall into sleep. The practice becomes sacred, each night an opportunity to rewrite the script, to step into the desired end, and to commune with the infinite creative presence that dwells beyond thought. Over time, this habit transforms not only the outcomes in life but also the inner being of the person, creating a harmony between what is within and what is without. The gateway to the subconscious, then, is the secret chamber of alchemy, and the last 5 minutes before sleep are the sacred window through which transformation is made possible by the power of assumption and the fidelity of feeling. The final 5 minutes before sleep are the most potent moments of your day. In those few minutes, your mind enters a state of natural transition where the boundary between the conscious and subconscious becomes blurred. And in that state, the impressions you make are absorbed most deeply and reproduced most faithfully. The power of assumption before sleep is rooted in the understanding that your life is not shaped primarily by what you think during the day, but by what you believe and feel to be true when your mind is still, unguarded, and open to suggestion. Assumption is not merely wishful thinking. It is the deliberate act of taking something unseen and treating it as if it were already fact, already present, already accomplished. What you assume to be true, especially in the stillness before sleep, becomes the seed from which your future grows. The reason the pre-sleep state holds such creative power is because your brain begins to move into slower, more receptive frequencies, alpha then theta, as it prepares to drift into unconsciousness. These frequencies are highly suggestible, meaning they are ideal for planting the seeds of assumption. At this point, your critical faculties are relaxed. The doubts, fears, and objections that normally resist your desires during the day are now quiet. The door is open to bypass the conscious mind and speak directly to the subconscious, and the subconscious will not argue. It will accept your assumptions as true and will begin to rearrange your reality to match them. In these moments, you become the master of your inner world, and your inner world is always the cause of the outer. Most people go to bed rehearsing their problems, revisiting their mistakes, worrying about tomorrow, or dwelling on what is lacking. These thoughts are not harmless. They are instructions to the subconscious. When you fall asleep in a state of fear, doubt, or unworthiness, you are instructing the creative power within you to reproduce those states in your lived experience. This is why the power of assumption must be used consciously and deliberately. Instead of rehearsing what you don't want, you must begin to dwell in what you do want as though it were already yours. This is the essence of assumption, to claim as real what your senses deny, and to persist in that claim until it becomes your lived reality. The assumption must be specific and emotionally real. It is not enough to say, I want to be wealthy or I hope to be healed. You must feel what it is like to already be that person, to live that experience, to walk in that reality. If you desire abundance, you must go to bed in the feeling of already having more than enough. If you desire love, you must rest in the security and warmth of being deeply cherished. If you desire healing, you must imagine the ease and vitality of perfect health, and let that feeling saturate your body. The subconscious responds not to idle words, but to felt reality. It mirrors back to you what you believe yourself to be, not what you wish to become. The power of assumption before sleep does not require effort in the traditional sense. You do not need to struggle or force your mind. You simply need to shift your inner identity and fall asleep as the person who already possesses what you desire. You create a scene that implies your desire is fulfilled and replay that scene with feeling until it becomes natural, until it feels like the truth. You dwell in that end and you do not disturb it with contradictions or doubts. You let the impression be made gently yet firmly, and you allow sleep to carry it deep into the fertile ground of your subconscious. This process, when repeated night after night, changes everything. The outer world begins to conform, slowly or suddenly, to the assumptions you plant with faith. New opportunities appear, old habits fall away, people respond differently, circumstances align, and none of this is accidental. It is the natural result of the inner change. Your assumptions have taken root, and life must reflect them, for that is the law. You are not waiting for your desire to come to pass. You are living from the state of already being the one who has it. That inner shift is what causes the outer transformation. What begins as an invisible feeling becomes a visible fact, and it all starts in those last few moments before your head rests fully in sleep. You must become the artist of your inner world. Before you surrender to the night, paint the picture you wish to experience, not with desperate longing, but with calm certainty. Assume that it is already done. Let your imagination show you what your senses cannot. Let your feeling anchor you in the truth of that unseen reality. This is how you use the power of assumption before sleep. Not as a hope, but as a law. Not as a fantasy, but as a command issued to the creative force that shapes every event in your world. Feeling is the bridge between the invisible and the visible, the secret key that unlocks the door to manifestation. It is not thought alone that creates reality, nor is it mere repetition of affirmations or passive visualization. The true engine of creation is feeling, deep, sustained, vivid emotion tied to the belief in an inner reality. This is not emotion in the volatile or reactive sense, but the quiet inner conviction, the emotional atmosphere you dwell in when you fully accept something as real. The universe, or more precisely, your subconscious mind, responds not to the words you say, but to the feeling those words carry. It mirrors not your surface thoughts, but the dominant emotional tone that colors your inner world. Feeling is the language of the subconscious, and what you feel intensely and persistently, especially in moments of stillness, becomes the pattern from which your external world is shaped. When one desires to change their outer world, they must begin not with external effort, but with inner transformation through feeling. The feeling of being loved, the feeling of being abundant, the feeling of being free. These are not just pleasant states to entertain, they are creative acts. To feel something as though it were already true is to give it life. It is to impress the subconscious with an idea clothed in the emotional substance it needs to reproduce it faithfully. Without feeling, imagination is weak, passive, and easily overruled by the senses. But when feeling is added to imagination, it becomes powerful, magnetic, and real to the subconscious, which does not distinguish between what is physically real and what is vividly felt to be real. Most people are ruled by the feelings that come from their external environment. They react emotionally to what they see, hear, and experience, and by doing so they continue to perpetuate the same conditions. But the one who understands the power of feeling reverses the process. Instead of letting the outer world dictate their inner state, they deliberately generate the feeling they desire, independent of current circumstances, and by doing so they begin to mold reality from within. This is the true meaning of creation, not reacting to what is, but generating what will be by entering into the feeling of it now. To feel from the end, to dwell in the emotional atmosphere of your fulfilled desire, is to make it inevitable. The subconscious accepts it as fact, and moves in perfect order to bring it to pass. This feeling must be lived. It is not enough to touch it once and return to doubt. You must abide in it, sleep in it, wake in it, carry it with you like a new identity. The feeling becomes your dwelling place, the internal state from which you live and move and have your being. It does not matter what your senses report to the contrary. You are not seeking evidence in the world, you are providing evidence to the subconscious through your emotional conviction. And the world must eventually conform, for it is nothing more than the projection of your inner state. What you feel on the inside, consistently and with belief, will become what you see on the outside. When you lie down at night, the most important task is to enter into the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Not as a question, not as a hope, but as a settled knowing. You construct a scene, perhaps brief, perhaps simple, but filled with the emotional content of your desired reality. You feel the joy, the relief, the gratitude, the peace that would be yours if it were already true. And you allow that feeling to grow until it saturates your consciousness. You do not simply think of the desire, you think from it. You assume the position of the one who already has, already is, already knows. This emotional state is the seed. When it is planted in the subconscious, it will grow, not by your effort but by the natural and unseen workings of the law. The greatest hindrance to manifestation is not lack of ability or time, but the inability to sustain the correct feeling. Many touch the feeling for a moment, but then fall back into fear or doubt. Others imagine the scene but never generate the corresponding emotion. It is the fusion of image and feeling that makes the difference. The mental picture coupled with the emotional reality. You must believe and feel as if the thing desired were already yours, and do so without contradiction. This is not self-deception, but creative alignment. You are not pretending in the sense of fooling yourself. You are impressing the subconscious with a new truth, a new pattern, a new identity. And because the subconscious is impersonal and obedient, it will externalize whatever it is impressed with, regardless of what the conscious mind thinks. The secret then is to make feeling your first priority. You are always feeling something, whether you are aware of it or not. The key is to feel deliberately, to use feeling as the medium through which you paint the canvas of your life. In every quiet moment, in every transition between waking and sleeping, you have the opportunity to choose your emotional state and plant it like a seed in the fertile soil of the subconscious. Over time, this deliberate emotional practice transforms your being and your world, not by force or willpower, but by alignment with the unseen forces that respond faithfully to what you feel to be true. Worry is one of the most common and destructive emotional states people carry into sleep, and yet it is also one of the most unnecessary. It is the mind's attempt to control what is unknown by rehearsing all that could go wrong, but in doing so it impresses the subconscious with precisely what one hopes to avoid. The tragedy is that most people do this unconsciously, without understanding the creative cost of such mental habits. They believe they are being responsible or prepared by considering negative outcomes, but they are in fact rehearsing failure, lack, and fear. When you go to bed in worry, you are clothing your assumptions in anxiety, and that becomes the vibration you hand over to the subconscious. The mind before sleep is not idle. It is a workshop where the blueprint of tomorrow is accepted. If you allow that blueprint to be painted with worry, then life has no choice but to express what you have planted. Replacing worry with the feeling of fulfillment is a conscious act, a choice that must be made with clarity and intention. It requires awareness of the internal dialogue you carry into the night. Instead of asking, "What if this goes wrong?" you begin to ask, "What if everything is already working out?" Instead of replaying scenarios of loss or rejection, you begin to rehearse outcomes of peace, provision, and love. This is not naivety or blind optimism. It is the redirection of the mind toward the reality you desire to experience. You recognize that worry has never solved anything. It has only prolonged the very states it dwells upon. By deliberately entering the feeling of fulfillment, you teach the subconscious a new language, a language that says, "All is well, it is done, I am safe, I am whole." And the subconscious, ever obedient, begins to outpicture that feeling as the events and circumstances of daily life. The shift from worry to fulfillment is not always instantaneous. It must often be practiced like any new habit. The mind, accustomed to identifying with problems, may resist, but you persist not by force, but by redirection. Each time the thought of lack arises, you return gently to the state of the wish fulfilled. You build the emotional muscle of faith, not faith in blind chance, but faith in the law of assumption, faith in your union with the creative power within. You begin to realize that your inner state does not have to be a reaction to the outer world. In fact, the more deliberately you cultivate the inner state of fulfillment, the more the outer world begins to change in accordance with that state. It is essential to understand that the feeling of fulfillment is not dependent on evidence. It is not the result of the desire coming true. It is the cause of it. You do not wait to feel peace once the situation is resolved. You feel peace now, and the situation aligns itself with that peace. You do not wait to feel abundant once the money arrives. You feel abundance now, and the circumstances rearrange to reflect that state. This is why worry must be replaced. It is not neutral, it is creative. And it creates what you do not want. Fulfillment, on the other hand, creates from the end. It assumes that the desire is already realized and then rests in that knowing. When you lie in bed at night, you are in the most receptive state of your day. Your body is relaxed, your mind is slowing down, and the gateway to the subconscious is wide open. In this sacred space, you have a choice to feed the subconscious with fear, lack, and insecurity, or to nourish it with peace, completion, and certainty. The images and feelings you carry into sleep do not vanish into the void. They are processed and accepted by the deeper layers of your being. They become instructions. They become patterns. They become reality. That is why the last thought, the final assumption before sleep, must be guarded with great care. It is the seed you are planting into the soil of your mind, and from that seed something will grow. The more consistently you replace worry with fulfillment, the more natural it becomes. You begin to live from a different frequency. People, opportunities, ideas, and changes start to emerge that match the new emotional tone you have established. You are no longer dominated by fear because you have taken control of your inner world. You no longer live in a state of anticipation that something may go wrong. Instead, you dwell in the assurance that things are already right. This internal security becomes magnetic. It draws to you not only the manifestations you desire, but a deeper sense of peace and stability that cannot be shaken by temporary conditions. You come to realize that worry is not a necessary companion in life. It is a habit, and like all habits, it can be broken. And once broken, it reveals a space that can be filled with something far greater, the feeling of fulfillment. This feeling, once cultivated and sustained, becomes the foundation from which all manifestations spring. It is the inner confirmation that allows the outer world to shift. When you learn to enter sleep from this state, not occasionally, but night after night, you are working with the law in its most potent form. You are giving the subconscious not a fragmented suggestion, but a consistent command, spoken through emotion. And because the subconscious never fails to obey the emotional tone it receives, life begins to mirror your inner transformation. The state you enter before sleep is the most fertile ground for creation, and it is in this state that you must learn to dwell in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. It is not enough to visualize or affirm mechanically. The real transformation happens when you become inwardly convinced that your desire is already a present reality. Entering sleep in this state means assuming the end, not as a future hope but as a present fact. This act of inner movement is subtle, quiet, and powerful. It is the spiritual art of making the imagined more real than the seen, and allowing that inner conviction to carry you into the unconscious with the emotional atmosphere of already having received. This state is not wishful thinking. It is a deliberate shift of identity. You stop being someone who wants or hopes and become the one who already is, already has, already lives in the reality you once longed for. Most people go to sleep as the same version of themselves they were throughout the day. Worried, uncertain, limited by circumstances. They lie in bed, rehashing conversations, reviewing problems, reliving disappointments, or planning with anxiety. But none of these inner states are neutral. The subconscious, ever alert as you descend into sleep, receives these impressions without resistance. It does not analyze, reject, or debate them. It simply accepts the dominant feeling present at the time of transition and begins to externalize it in your waking life. To enter sleep without consciousness is to give your power away. To enter sleep in the feeling of the wish fulfilled is to claim your divine authorship over your reality. The way to do this is through assumption and emotional embodiment. You must bring to mind a scene, a short, vivid, believable moment that would naturally occur if your desire were already fulfilled. It must be something simple, something that implies the end has already happened. If you wish to be loved, you might imagine yourself being embraced, hearing the words you long for, feeling the warmth of connection. If you desire financial freedom, you might imagine seeing your bank balance, paying for something with ease, or receiving words of congratulations. The key is not the complexity of the scene, but the feeling it evokes. You do not simply observe the scene as an outsider. You place yourself within it, feel it, breathe it, absorb it. And when you feel that it is done, that it is real, you let that feeling carry you into sleep. This process is deeply transformative because it rewires the emotional and energetic imprint you carry into the subconscious. Instead of reinforcing the old state of lack or need, you are now saturating your inner world with the emotional signature of completion. This becomes the new set point from which the subconscious begins to rearrange the pieces of your life. The outer world, which is only a mirror of the inner state, begins to shift. New encounters arise, unforeseen opportunities open, and previously impossible outcomes begin to materialize. This is not magic. It is the lawful operation of consciousness. What you accept as true within must eventually express itself without. You do not need to do this with strain or effort. In fact, effort suggests doubt. This process is one of surrender, of allowing yourself to rest in the state of already being. You are not trying to make something happen. You are accepting that it already has. The feeling of effortlessness is itself a sign that you are aligned with the wish fulfilled. The more natural the scene becomes, the more believable it feels, the more easily it is accepted by the subconscious. As you drift into sleep, that feeling becomes the dominant note in the symphony of your consciousness, and the subconscious begins to play it back through the events of your waking life. You must also learn to persist in this practice. One night may bring subtle changes, but consistent inner assumption brings transformation. Each night is a new opportunity to impress the subconscious with the emotional reality of your desire. Each night, as you return to that inner scene, you make it more vivid, more alive, more accepted. You begin to notice that your reactions during the day start to change. You no longer respond with fear or doubt, because your inner state has been shifted. You are no longer hoping for change. You are living from it. The change has already occurred within, and the world is catching up. What makes this process so powerful is its simplicity. It does not require rituals, long hours of practice, or external confirmation. It only requires that you believe in the unseen, that you allow feeling to become the measure of truth, and that you trust in the intelligence of the subconscious to bring forth that which you have accepted. You become like a seed planted in the earth. You do not dig it up to check if it is growing. You water it with feeling and rest in knowing it will break through in its time. By entering sleep in the state of the wish fulfilled, you align yourself with your ideal and set into motion forces that are beyond your conscious control. You step into a flow of life that responds not to your struggle, but to your surrender to the reality you have claimed. You become the person you seek to be, not by chasing change, but by resting in the truth that it already is. And as you persist in this inner knowing, night after night, the world will begin to confirm what you have long assumed in the silence before sleep. What you carry into sleep, you carry into creation. The moments before you drift into unconsciousness are not to be treated lightly. They are the sacred chamber where the seeds of your future are planted. If you enter sleep burdened with worry, regret, or fear, those states will echo into your reality. But if you choose to enter sleep in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, with the quiet assurance that all you desire is already yours, then you awaken into a world shaped by faith, not fear. This is not a one-time effort, but a daily invitation, a quiet, powerful discipline of assuming your ideal as real and resting in it. In those final 5 minutes before sleep, choose to become the version of yourself who already has, already is, already lives in the fulfillment you seek. Let that feeling saturate your being, and let sleep carry it deep into the fertile soil of your subconscious. And as surely as night gives way to day, life will begin to mirror the truth you have dared to assume. Imagine just for a moment that your imagination is not a mere plaything, not a passing fantasy or idle distraction, but the very creative power of your reality. What if every scene you inwardly construct, every image you faithfully revisit, carries within it the seed of actual events in your outer world? This is not speculation, it is law. And tonight we shall walk through an experiment, a simple yet profound act, that will prove this truth to you, not by argument but by experience. You will not be asked to believe blindly, rather you will be invited to test, to do, and to see. For he who dares to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and persists, will find that what once lived only in imagination now takes shape before his waking eyes. This is the ladder exercise, a gateway from thought to thing, from unseen to seen. Let us begin. Imagination is not a passive mental activity. It is the creative act itself. When one imagines, one creates. The world we see and experience is nothing more than a reflection of the images we have nurtured within our own consciousness. This is not metaphor but literal truth. Every condition, every circumstance, every event that appears in the outer world has its origin in the unseen realm of thought and feeling. Imagination is the beginning and the end, the alpha and the omega of creation. Most people believe they are thinking reality into existence, when in truth they are merely reacting to what they see, unaware that their reactions themselves are creative acts. What we accept as true in imagination becomes true in experience. It is through imagination that we perceive our desires fulfilled, and in that very perception the foundation is laid for their manifestation. The great error of the world is to believe that imagination is weak, that it is nothing more than a fleeting fancy disconnected from reality. But those who truly understand the law know otherwise. Imagination is causative. It is the womb of reality. It does not simply reflect the world, it shapes it. When you imagine something vividly and emotionally, you are planting a seed in the fertile soil of the subconscious mind. The subconscious, accepting the imagined state as real, begins to organize the outer world in accordance with the inner vision. This is not something you must force with effort or strive to accomplish through external means. The work is done entirely within. It is through inner acceptance, inner seeing, and inner feeling that outer changes begin to occur. The power of imagination is that it allows you to occupy a state before the evidence of that state appears. You do not wait for proof. You provide the proof through your own inner experience. When you imagine yourself to be something, and persist in that assumption, the world bends itself to reflect your assumption. This is the mystery the world fails to see. People live by appearances, by facts, by what they can touch and measure. But facts change. Appearances shift. What is solid today can vanish tomorrow, and what is invisible now can become tangible with nothing more than the sustained act of imagining. To imagine is to choose your future. It is to rise above the limitations of the senses and claim a higher truth, a deeper reality. If you can imagine it and remain faithful to that imagining, then by law it must become your experience. The law does not fail. It cannot fail. The only variable is the imaginer, whether he believes, whether he persists, whether he truly assumes the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Imagination is your bridge from where you are to where you desire to be. You need no external confirmation to begin. You need only a willingness to turn inward, to become still, and to see yourself already in possession of that which you seek. Every great advancement in a person's life begins not with action, but with a vision. The vision precedes the fact. The inner state shapes the outer condition. This is why we are told to walk by faith, not by sight. Because sight is merely the echo of past imaginal acts. Faith is imagination disciplined, directed toward a specific end. It is the refusal to accept the evidence of the senses when that evidence contradicts the deeper knowing of the heart. To live imaginatively is to live freely. It is to step into the role of creator rather than victim. You are not at the mercy of circumstances. You are the maker of them. And the tool by which you make is imagination. Many resist this truth because it places responsibility squarely on the individual. It removes excuses and strips away the illusion that life happens to us. But this is a liberating truth. It means that no matter what has occurred in the past, no matter how dark or limited one's present conditions may be, a new reality is always within reach. It is just a thought away, an assumption away, a feeling away. Imagination is the door, and everyone possesses the key. No one is excluded from its power. Whether you are rich or poor, educated or unlearned, healthy or unwell, the power to imagine is within you, and through it all things are possible. You do not have to know how your desire will come to pass. You only have to see it, feel it, and live in the end of it. The how is not your concern. The law handles the means. Your work is to remain faithful to the imaginal act, to occupy the desired state inwardly until it becomes more real to you than the external world. Once that shift occurs, reality begins to mirror the inner change. This is the secret known by mystics, prophets, and visionaries throughout time. They have always understood that imagination is not fiction. It is the very foundation of the world. To master imagination is to master life. The latter exercise is not a ritual, nor is it a technique for momentary amusement. It is a profound experiment designed to prove a spiritual law in your own experience. Its purpose is not merely to produce the climbing of a ladder, but to awaken you to the realization that your imagination creates your reality. It serves as a tangible, verifiable demonstration of the principle that imagining a specific scene and immersing yourself in it emotionally will bring about that scene in your physical world. This exercise is deceptively simple, but within its simplicity lies immense spiritual power. You are not being asked to take anything on faith alone. You are being invited to test the law. Through this test you will come to know, not believe, but know that consciousness is the only reality, and that whatever you persistently assume to be true inwardly will inevitably express itself outwardly. The exercise begins by asking you to imagine, with vivid detail, the act of climbing a ladder. Not merely seeing the ladder or thinking of the ladder, but feeling yourself actually climbing it. You are to do this every night before sleep, ideally in that drowsy receptive state when your conscious mind begins to fade and the subconscious is most open. In that state, you must visualize your hands reaching for the rungs, your feet pushing upward, the texture of the wood or metal beneath your palms, the motion of your body rising, step by step. Feel it as real, not as something you want to do, but as something you are doing. In that moment of imagining, you must not be someone hoping to climb a ladder. You must be the one climbing it. The critical instruction, however, is what follows. After impressing this imaginal scene deeply upon the subconscious, you must go about your days declaring to yourself, "I will not climb a ladder." This contradiction is not confusion, but an essential part of the experiment. It exposes the power and influence of the subconscious mind over the conscious will. You are consciously denying the event while subconsciously accepting it, and you will soon see which aspect of yourself governs your experience. The outer declaration is intended to be in direct opposition to the inner assumption, so that when the ladder climbing experience manifests in your world, often in an unexpected and ordinary way, you will know with certainty that it came not from your outer decisions, but from your inner state. What this exercise does is make undeniable the fact that what you accept emotionally and vividly within, even if denied outwardly, must come to pass. It removes all philosophical debate. It does not rely on intellectual understanding or theological agreement. It is a first-hand experiment, and its results speak for themselves. If you persist in the imaginal act, truly immersing yourself in the scene night after night, without strain, without force, but with belief in the feeling of the act itself, you will find that sooner or later, often within days, you are confronted with the opportunity or necessity to climb a ladder, and in that moment the truth will strike you. Imagination is the source of reality. This experiment is powerful precisely because it is small and specific. There is no emotional attachment to climbing a ladder. It is a neutral event which allows you to practice the principle without interference from doubt or fear. You are not imagining $1 million or a dramatic life change, where resistance and conflicting beliefs might arise. Instead, you are dealing with a simple physical act that requires no logic to believe, only participation. And that is the genius of the exercise. It gives you the proof of principle, so that once you see how imagination produces this minor event, you will no longer question its ability to produce greater ones. Once this principle is proven through the ladder exercise, the implications begin to unfold naturally. If imagination can cause you to climb a ladder, then why not imagine yourself into a new career, a new relationship, a new health condition, a new identity? The same law applies. What you accept as true in imagination becomes true in your world. But the ladder is the training ground, the foundation, the place where you stop hoping and start knowing. It is where theory becomes experience. No one can do it for you. It is not a concept to admire but an action to perform. You must do it for yourself. Imagine climbing the ladder. Repeat the act every night. Declare outwardly that you will not climb one. Then observe your world, and you will see how the invisible shapes the visible, how the unseen becomes seen, how a thought becomes an event. The role of assumption and feeling in manifestation is not secondary. It is central. Everything begins with an assumption. Before any action is taken or result is seen, a state must be assumed internally. To assume is to occupy a state as though it were already true. It is not about wishing or hoping, for those are passive states. Assumption is active. It is the deliberate choosing of a condition, the conscious acceptance of a reality not yet visible to the senses. But assumption alone, when it is dry or mechanical, will not yield results. It must be infused with feeling. Feeling is the lifeblood of assumption. It is what animates the imagined scene and imprints it on the subconscious mind. Without feeling, an assumption is a lifeless image. With feeling, it becomes a creative command. To assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled is to move beyond the intellect and into the realm of spiritual causation. The outer world may remain unchanged for a time, but the inner world shifts immediately. And because the inner world is the cause of all outer phenomena, that inner shift must express itself in form. Assumption is not about affirming something repeatedly with strained belief. It is about sinking into the state of the fulfilled desire so deeply that it feels like home. You are not trying to convince yourself of something. You are letting go of what contradicts it and embracing what supports it. You live in the end, and you live there inwardly, regardless of what the senses report. This inner living is not pretending, it is creating. Pretending acknowledges the lack. Creating acknowledges the truth of your assumption. When you assume a state, you do not fight your current conditions. You do not resist the facts. You transcend them. The outer world may present lack, but the inner assumption presents fulfillment. And the more you dwell in the inner fulfillment, the more your outer world reshapes itself to match it. The world is a mirror, and it always reflects the state you are most consistently in. Feeling is the key to holding that state. It is the emotional conviction that what you are imagining is real. It is the certainty that allows you to walk through life as if the thing you desire is already yours. And in that confidence, in that quiet certainty, the law responds. Life begins to arrange itself in subtle, invisible, and sometimes miraculous ways to support your inner stance. You do not need to know how your assumption will come to pass. The how is never your concern. Your only task is to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and persist in that feeling regardless of appearances. The world will offer resistance because it reflects your old assumptions until the new one takes root. But if you do not waver, if you remain loyal to your assumption and continue to feel its reality, the outer world must eventually bow to the inner command. Assumption creates facts. It may not be immediate, and it may not arrive in the way you expect, but the law is unfailing. As you feel, so shall it be done unto you. Feeling is the bridge. It connects the imaginal act to the physical result. When the feeling is real, when it is deeply felt, when you are inwardly convinced that what you imagine is already true, you have set a law in motion that nothing can reverse unless you reverse it yourself. This is why persistence in assumption is so essential. It is not a matter of repeating something out of desperation, but of remaining in the state long enough for it to externalize. You become one with your desire. You identify with it. You no longer see it as something separate, but as something already existing within you. This identification is what draws the unseen into visibility. You are not waiting for the world to give you permission. You are not seeking validation from others. You have chosen your state, and you live in it inwardly with complete confidence. The feeling of the wish fulfilled becomes your new reality, and everything else adjusts to reflect it. Assumption and feeling together are the tools by which you create your life. They are not bound by logic or time. They are immediate, intimate, and infinitely powerful. You do not need anything outside of yourself to begin using them. The moment you choose to assume a state and feel its truth, you have begun the creative process. All that remains is persistence. Not struggle, not force, but quiet persistence in the state. The outer world is slow to change only when the inner world is unstable. But when you assume a state with deep feeling and sustain that feeling with faith, the change becomes inevitable. It may come in unexpected ways, but it will come, for the law cannot fail. Assumption and feeling are the beginning and end of all creation. They are the essence of the manifesting power within you. Detachment from the outcome is one of the most misunderstood yet vital components in the process of manifestation. Many believe that if they intensely desire something and constantly think about it, they are bringing it closer to themselves, when in truth they may be doing the opposite. Constant longing, obsession, or worry about whether a desire will manifest creates a vibration of lack. It communicates to the subconscious that the thing desired is separate, distant, or uncertain. Detachment, however, is not indifference. It is not about giving up on your desire. It is the quiet confidence that once you have imagined and felt your wish fulfilled, the creative process is already in motion. You no longer need to interfere, question, or anxiously await its arrival. You rest in the inner assurance that it is done. To be detached means you have assumed the end so completely that you are no longer emotionally stirred by the absence of its evidence. You are unmoved by appearances. You are anchored in the inner knowing that the reality you imagined is already yours. You do not beg, plead, or chase. You do not live in fear of delay. Detachment is the expression of inner security. It is the result of deep faith in the unseen, a faith that does not require proof because it knows the proof will come in its own time and way. When you are truly detached, you are not controlled by the outer world. You are rooted in your inner conviction. You can enjoy your present without anxiety or restlessness, because your fulfillment no longer depends on what is happening outside of you. Detachment also allows the subconscious to operate freely. The subconscious mind, once impressed with an imaginal act, will begin to orchestrate all necessary means for its fulfillment. But when the conscious mind constantly interferes with worry, doubt, or forced action, it disrupts the natural flow. It delays the process by introducing conflicting vibrations. You must allow the seed to grow without digging it up every day to see if it has sprouted. You plant the seed through assumption and feeling, and then you water it with faith and detachment. You know that what you have imagined will take form, and because you know it, you do not need to see it immediately. You trust the process. You are not watching the clock or scanning the world for signs. You walk in the knowing that it is already done. True detachment creates a sense of peace. You are no longer striving or grasping. You are no longer trying to make things happen by sheer effort or willpower. You are living from the end, and that inner position frees you from struggle. It does not mean you become passive or lazy, but that any action you take flows from inspiration rather than fear. You are not reacting to circumstances. You are responding from a place of wholeness. Detachment also makes your assumption more powerful because it removes the energy of desperation. Desperation weakens your position. It signals to the subconscious that you do not truly believe in the fulfillment of your desire. But when you let go of needing it, when you release the urgency, and simply rest in the state of the wish fulfilled, you become magnetic. You become aligned. You are no longer resisting your good. It is often at the moment of surrender, at the point when you truly let go, that the manifestation comes. This is not because letting go creates the desire, but because letting go removes the blocks to its expression. Detachment is the absence of inner resistance. It is the space that allows the imaginal act to breathe and unfold naturally. When you are detached, you can still enjoy the thought of your desire. You can revisit it with pleasure and confidence, but you do not need it to prove anything to you. You already know who you are, and you already know that your assumptions are being fulfilled. This inner calmness is a sign of mastery. It shows that you are no longer controlled by appearances but by inner vision. People often confuse detachment with apathy, but the two are vastly different. Apathy has no desire, no energy, no vision. Detachment has desire but no fear. It is passionate and purposeful without being anxious or needy. It is focused but not obsessed. You can care deeply about something and still be detached from when or how it arrives. In fact, this is the most powerful state you can enter. It shows that you have fully accepted your desire as already real, and because of that you do not demand it appear in a specific way or on a specific timeline. You trust that the law of assumption is at work and that the fulfillment of your desire is inevitable. The paradox of manifestation is that the more you let go, the more quickly it comes. This is not because detachment makes your desire stronger, but because it clears away the noise that often delays its arrival. It returns you to a natural state of faith, which is the perfect soil for manifestation. When you are no longer emotionally entangled in the outcome, you create space for the unseen to organize itself around your assumption. You are no longer holding on so tightly that you block the flow. You are open, receptive, and aligned. You have chosen your end. You have felt it as real, and now you let the world rearrange itself accordingly. Testing the law through personal experience is the most direct and transformative way to understand the power of imagination. It moves the knowledge from theory into knowing, from speculation into certainty. One can read about these principles, listen to others speak of them, even admire their logic, but until one applies them personally, the truth remains distant and abstract. The only way to truly grasp the creative power of assumption and imagination is to experiment with it yourself. This is why you are not asked to believe blindly or accept anything based on authority. You are invited to test the law, to prove it within the laboratory of your own life, and to draw your conclusions from the results you receive. No one can argue with your personal experience. When you apply the law and witness the fulfillment of your imaginal acts, something shifts within you permanently. Doubt begins to disappear, not because you were convinced by reason, but because you were awakened by evidence. To test the law is to take a specific desire or scene and consciously construct it in your imagination. You choose something that is clear and concrete. You imagine it vividly, engaging all your senses, and most importantly, you enter into the feeling that the desire is already fulfilled. You make it so real inwardly that it begins to affect your emotional state. You feel the satisfaction, the relief, the joy that comes with the fulfillment of your desire, and you remain in that feeling as often as possible. You are not concerned with how or when it will come to pass. You are not looking for signs or trying to manipulate the external world. You are simply living from the end, inwardly convinced that your assumption is true. This is the test. When you carry out this experiment with sincerity and persistence, something begins to happen. The world around you responds. Events shift, people appear, opportunities emerge. Sometimes the manifestation comes in a way so natural and effortless that you almost overlook it. And yet you remember the imaginal act and realize it has been fulfilled in exact or symbolic form. Other times the result may come with a suddenness that stuns the rational mind. In either case, the conclusion is the same. What you imagined and assumed inwardly has now expressed itself outwardly. The law works, and because it works, it can be relied upon not only in small matters but in the great affairs of life. These personal tests do more than prove a point. They reshape your relationship with life itself. You begin to understand that you are not a victim of chance or circumstance. You are not subject to random events or external forces beyond your control. You are the operant power. You are the one who creates. And with that understanding comes responsibility. You start to pay attention to the thoughts you entertain, the assumptions you carry, the inner conversations you repeat. You begin to see how every state you inhabit produces its corresponding effects. The inner world and the outer world are not disconnected. They are intimately linked, and through your own testing of the law you come to see this as more than a concept. It becomes a lived reality. Testing the law also brings clarity. Many people wonder why their desires do not manifest or why certain situations persist. When you begin testing the law consciously, you gain insight into your own patterns. You see where you have been assuming lack, failure, or limitation, even while trying to affirm something different. You notice the subtle doubts, the habitual fears, the moments where you abandon the feeling of the wish fulfilled. This awareness allows you to correct your course. It is not about blame or judgment. It is about learning how to discipline the imagination, how to remain loyal to your assumption, and how to trust the process. Every test is an opportunity to refine your understanding, to deepen your faith, and to increase your creative power. There is a beauty in testing the law with small desires at first. These early successes build confidence. They show you that the principle works, and they encourage you to stretch into larger manifestations. But regardless of size, the process remains the same. The law does not discriminate. Whether you imagine climbing a ladder or receiving a large sum of money, the mechanics are identical. What matters is the intensity of your assumption, the persistence of your feeling, and the absence of doubt. The more you test the law, the more you develop a relationship with it. It becomes a trusted friend, a source of assurance, a foundation on which you can build your life. The invitation to test the law is not just about proving a spiritual truth. It is about reclaiming your power. It is about realizing that you are not here to beg life for crumbs, but to create boldly from the unseen realm of imagination. You are not limited by your past, your environment, or your resources. You are limited only by what you are willing to assume and feel as true. Every test you undertake is a step closer to mastering this inner power, and each success, no matter how small, reinforces the understanding that you are the creator of your reality. Testing the law turns knowledge into wisdom. It transforms belief into conviction. It awakens you to the truth that imagining creates reality, and that truth once proven can never be unlearned. Manifestation through repetition and belief is not merely a technique but a discipline of the mind and spirit. It requires consistency, focus, and a deliberate effort to saturate the subconscious with a specific assumption until it becomes a dominant state. One does not simply imagine something once and expect the world to instantly conform. The creative power of imagination works through persistent, repeated impressions that impress upon the subconscious mind a new reality. Every time you repeat an imaginal act, every time you revisit the scene of your desire fulfilled and feel its truth, you are strengthening that reality within. The subconscious does not respond to casual or scattered thoughts. It responds to sustained and emotionally charged assumptions. Repetition allows the imagined state to move from being a momentary fantasy into a deeply held conviction, and belief born out of that repetition becomes the engine that brings the imagined into the actual. Belief is not something that must be forced. It is something that grows naturally through practice. As you continue to repeat a scene, embodying the feeling of the wish fulfilled, something shifts within. What once felt like imagination now begins to feel normal, even inevitable. The mind accepts the new assumption as fact, and from that acceptance the manifestation becomes a matter of time. The outer world does not resist a deeply held belief. It conforms to it. It reflects it. When belief is strong and unwavering, the manifestation process becomes smooth and effortless. You are no longer looking to see if it worked. You are living from the certainty that it already has. Repetition is the path to that certainty. It is not mechanical repetition that holds power, but the kind that is infused with feeling, intention, and focus. When you repeat an imaginal scene with emotion and conviction, you are reprogramming your internal reality. You are replacing old patterns, doubts, and assumptions with a new blueprint. The subconscious accepts this new pattern as its directive and begins to execute it without questioning. Just as repeated negative thoughts and fears can become reality through unconscious repetition, so can deliberate and constructive imaginal acts shape a new world. It is the same law at work. The only difference is the direction in which it is applied. Conscious repetition gives you control over what you are planting in the fertile soil of the subconscious. It gives you the power to override old beliefs that may have kept you trapped in limitation and to replace them with new ones that lead to freedom and fulfillment. Belief built through repetition also creates emotional alignment. You are no longer at war within yourself. The mind and the heart move in the same direction. There is no conflict between what you want and what you expect. You are no longer saying one thing and feeling another. Through repetition, your assumption becomes second nature. It becomes the filter through which you interpret the world. You begin to see signs of its fulfillment even before it fully manifests, because your inner world has changed so completely that your perception itself has shifted. This shift in perception is a critical part of manifestation. You see opportunities, connections, and paths that were previously invisible. What changed was not the world, but your inner state, your belief. It is through repetition that the mind is trained to hold its vision. The world will often present contrary evidence. It will try to pull your attention back to the facts, to the visible, to the things that appear to contradict your assumption. But repetition creates resilience. It builds a foundation strong enough to withstand appearances. You are no longer swayed by what you see, because you have seen something greater within. You return to your inner scene. You relive it. You re-feel it. And in doing so, you reassert your creative power. This inner repetition becomes a refuge and a fortress. No matter what happens outside, you know what you have created within, and that knowing is enough. Even when belief is not initially strong, repetition helps bridge the gap. You may start by imagining something that feels unlikely or even impossible, but as you continue to dwell in the scene, feel its truth, and see it as done, belief begins to grow. The subconscious does not distinguish between fact and fiction. It only responds to what is impressed upon it repeatedly and emotionally. Over time, your inner world changes. What once felt foreign becomes familiar. What once seemed beyond reach becomes your new standard. Manifestation becomes less about effort and more about alignment. It becomes the natural outflow of a state you have lived in long enough for it to become real to you. This is why consistency is so vital. Sporadic imagining yields sporadic results. But daily, intentional, emotionally rich repetition creates lasting change. It rewires your self-concept. It alters your identity. You begin to act, think, speak, and respond from your assumed end. The line between the imaginal and the actual dissolves, and life begins to mirror the inner pattern. You are not forcing the world to change. You are changing yourself, and the world responds accordingly. This process is not instant, but it is inevitable when done faithfully. Repetition creates belief, and belief manifests reality. This is the path walked by all who have consciously created their lives. It is the quiet, persistent work of inner transformation, done not through force, but through focused, feeling-infused imagining, day after day, until what once lived only in the unseen becomes undeniably present in the seen. The truth of imagination is not something to be argued or debated. It is something to be proven. Through the ladder exercise and the principles that surround it, you have been given more than a method. You have been handed a key to unlock the unseen power within you. Assumption, feeling, repetition, and detachment are not mere ideas, but the very tools by which reality is shaped. When you test this law, when you faithfully assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and persist regardless of appearances, you will witness the unseen becoming seen. You are not waiting on the world to change. You are changing your inner world and watching as the outer follows. This is your invitation to step into your divine inheritance, to create consciously, to manifest deliberately, and to know beyond all doubt that imagination is the only reality. The power is within you. Now it is time to use it.